welcome to the much anticipated Rosacea Talk.
I'm Christina Hawley.
I'm Ray, and we're here to talk about everybody's favorite subject in the skincare world because an amazing number of people have it. Most people know that they have it. A lot of people actually don't know that they have it. But
It's also really overdiagnosed. I get I get tons of clients who come in and they say, well, I just went to the dermatologist and I have rosacea. And even when I wouldn't necessarily classify it as that, I think it's a term that gets thrown around a lot. It's a big umbrella term where you can kind of call anything rosacea these days.
It's kind of like, okay, it's got the common denominator with everything else. It's an inflammatory condition, but that also includes eczema, perioral dermatitis, you name it, and it's aging. Starts out as inflammation, and so rosacea is just kind of convenient for people.
Well, and I think if you get the diagnosis of rosacea, then you can get a prescription of Metrogel or something, and then they just cross their fingers and hope that it helps.
Okay, and that's exactly what happened to me. I went in to Kaiser when I began to notice, and this was before I knew anything about skin really, but I went in and talked to the dermatologist, and you spend 3 to 4 minutes, and they say, "Oh, you have rosacea. Here's your Metrogel prescription," and you go home and throw it in the bushes or whatever.
What was your skin like at that point?
It was flushing occasionally, but to the obvious triggers like heat and UV exposure, and those are still the most obvious triggers today. The other thing that they plagued me with, of course, was saying, caffeine is a terrible trigger, and so I tried going without my beloved iced tea for a while.
Would you flush when you drank iced tea?
I did, but now I don't care. I mean, it's simply, I'm not going to get like this, for instance. Cheers. And we'll see if we actually okay, this is live. See, I'm hardly wearing.
Just take a sip and we'll see if your face turns red.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Oh God, that's already happening. Yeah, I'm turning red. And it could
be. Laughter is a trigger.
Yes, any emotion does it.
Yeah.
All these things. So they tell you, okay, what are you going to do? You're not going to not live your life. So I don't recommend that, guys. If you are diagnosed with rosacea, let's talk about some of the symptoms.
Well, let's back up and let's talk about what rosacea is, because I think it can be really helpful if you understand the biological process that results in some of the symptoms that we classify as rosacea. So rosacea is an inflammatory skin disorder, but it's resulting from improper innate immune response. So it's an issue with the immune system of the skin and the internal body. It's important to think of it as a systemic issue. It's not just within the tissues of the skin. It has a lot to do with the health of the body, the organs, the circulation. Yes. As well as what's going on topically within the skin, within the tissues of the skin, within the entire system. But if you think about, let's break it down to the inflammatory response of the skin and what happens there.
Okay, well, see, here's the interesting part, is we know a lot more than we did even 5 years ago about rosacea, and we're sort of narrowing it down into an innate immune system response that produces, for instance, in response, something called catholicidins.
What are catholicidins?
Well, catholicidins are these little peptides that you produce when your immune system sees an attacker out there, and so in response, it will produce these substances that go on to create inflammation as a way to repel the attackers. So, but what happens with people with rosacea is that they are producing an excess of catholicidins for one thing, but these catholicitins don't behave normally. And so, there's a lot about rosacea it's not anybody and everybody can get rosacea. It is confined. Most people, here, the statistics are that most of the people who have rosacea are of Northern European descent, and a third of them have a family history of rosacea. So they call it the Celtic curse for a reason.
But I would go ahead and say that if you look at my client group, those are statistics, but I don't think it's limited to that. I've had clients of all types with rosacea. I think it's more, those are kind of outdated statistics, and I think it's more and more an issue of immune system. And as there's a rise right now in autoimmune disorders in the body, there's also a rise of rosacea.
Yeah, unless you want to argue that, and you said yourself, that a lot of rosacea is misdiagnosed, and I think a lot of stuff that you're seeing also falls under this umbrella of not classic rosacea, which really is of this type where you have this weird immune system response. I think what other people develop is something that looks a lot like rosacea, because what does rosacea look like?
Well, the thing is there's a million different types of triggers, and then there's a million different types of symptoms. So classic rosacea is flushing, redness, dilated capillaries, broken blood vessels, and then kind of the extreme version of rosacea would be concentrated around the nose and pimple-like pustules around the cheeks, and it can kind of spread all over the face, but typically we see rosacea or no rosacea to be isolated to the cheeks and the nose area.
There's also ocular rosacea, which affects about 50% of people who have rosacea, and that shows up as like blepharitis or stingy, itchy eyelids or something like that. Which may indicate that you've got a mite over-infestation. We're going to talk about that in a bit. But there's also the nose thing, the rhinophyma. That's mostly men, and that's where you get the thickening of the skin around the nose. W.C. Fields had it. Bill Clinton has it. So, and these, they are often, kind of vilified as being drunks, but it's not really that. It used to be that people thought that these people were just drinking too much, but it has nothing to do.
Turns out there's so many different triggers. So kind of to simplify and summarize, when you have a symptom of rosacea, what you have is a compromised or vulnerable immune system, you have a trigger, and then you have this kind of improper immune response, which signals the inflammatory cascade within the skin, which then secretes these antimicrobial peptides, which Marie mentioned. Catholicidin is one type of antimicrobial peptides. And what catholicidin does is it increases blood flow to the skin, dilates the capillaries, and results in a redness or flushing of the skin. So it's kind of like a simplified way to talk about the immune response within the skin.
Yeah, it's a pretty complicated molecular pathway, but one of the culprits we have definitely identified along the pathway is catholicidin, and so that again fits into the
which is normally a wonderful part of the skin system. Like that immune response is really well designed. It's supposed to work really well, but this is that immune response firing for unnecessary reasons. And so the real trick when dealing with rosacea is figuring out why is the immune system compromised, why is it vulnerable, and then what are the triggers that are firing this unnecessary immune response, how to avoid those, boost immune response, and kind of heal the skin that way. So, I want to start off and say that even though people say rosacea is uncurable, you can make such improvements in the skin if you really tackle this holistically and look at all the details and support healthy skin function. You can go from pretty severe stages of rosacea to skin that does not appear to have rosacea at all.
Yeah, and that's actually a big breakthrough, because you couldn't have said that 10 years ago when they were handing out Metrogel to everybody, and cross your fingers, maybe it'll work, or maybe they'd add antibiotics. But have we covered what the triggers are?
No, let's talk about triggers.
All right. Well, triggers, it varies for different people, but 80% of people do react to UV exposure who have rosacea, and heat is another one. And those are the plagues of anybody who has rosacea. The other ones, Christina knows more about the hormonal part of it, and I know a little bit about the micro part of it because my first love is bugs. So even the ones that
And
may
that's-
be giving me rosacea.
That's the kind of new exciting stuff is that,
Yeah.
the probiotic therapy, which we'll talk about later,
Yeah.
and how.
Oh, yeah. Let's.
Okay,
not
we'll say
forget.
that.
Yeah. Okay.
The subject of hormones being a trigger is really, really complex, and that is something that could be an entirely like a topic of its own. Some of the major contributing factors in the hormonal picture are menopause. So there's large changes with estrogen levels during menopause, which will change a lot of the signals within the skin, decrease the amount of oil produced, kind of the sebum profile. You're also dealing with hot flashes, which brings more increased blood flow to the face and more heat, which can trigger rosacea as well. And then there's also, types of rosacea in which women can experience at various parts of their cycle based on their levels of estrogen in relation to progesterone and testosterone. Again, it's really complicated, but since all of those hormones are such big contributing players to the skin system, you can see times in which you would get really flushed after a run or with a glass of wine, and times when you wouldn't. So rosacea can vary in severity, and it has to do with when your body is more vulnerable and your immune system is more compromised, and other times when your baseline levels of inflammation are just lower and your body's like a little bit stronger and more stable.
Yeah, so here you've got a case where, heat is a trigger, UV exposure is a trigger, also creates heat. The hormones sounds like they create heat at certain times, which is the real problem. It seems to be that heat is a real culprit with rosacea, but that leaves out of the picture the human Demodex. So the human Demodex is the mite that lives on the skin. Everybody has human Demodex pretty much, but people with rosacea tend to have about 50% more of the human Demodex living on their skin. So they're little mites, and they live in the hair follicle, and they feed off the sebum. They have a very interesting life cycle that I won't get into now, but if you want to read about it, you can.
It's 14 days, right?
Oh yeah, and they're very interesting physiologically. They're very amusing, but but what they do and what they think might and human Demodex, they batted around the subject of, it's the mites, no, it's not the mites, that seems so, really, really pushing it, but it turns out that it's a real thing, and they release bacteria, they just generate bacteria when they're living on their skin in the course of their life cycle that create bacteria that your immune system responds to. And because if you have rosacea, you're dealing with an immune system that doesn't behave as it should, before you know it, you've got the whole, arachidonic cascade going, and it's releasing the cytokines and the leukotrienes and all of those other inflammatory particles, substances that are creating that the immune system uses to repel attackers. So healthy immune systems work that way, but the problem with an immune system from a rosacea person is that it just responds inappropriately. So there you have it with that particular potential, environmental condition that could create rosacea. Goes on from there to create the toll-like receptors, and then from there you get the catholicidins, you get the reactive oxygen species. Are we going to go there next, or what do you want to do?
Well, I think we can still talk about triggers a little bit. Topical products can end up being a trigger. So something like
true.
benzoyl peroxide, or using products with alcohol, very astringent.
Sunscreens are a huge no-no for people with rosacea, actually.
Kind of sensitizing ingredients. I find if you just, instead of getting really specific about triggers in terms of topicals and ingredients, if you're always just thinking about strengthening the skin system and thinking back to barrier function, you can kind of eliminate that fear. So if you're using a product that is going to work counterproductively towards the way the skin wants to function, then you can put yourself into a compromised state where you are vulnerable to rosacea.
Yeah, but here we are with the rosacea person's dilemma, which is we all know we need sun protection, and people with rosacea really need sun protection every day. But when I was younger, and every sunscreen I put on made me break out, flare up, and do these horrible things. So chemical sunscreens, as I learned, were not good for the skin, did trigger the flare-ups, and so there you are. What's your choice? Okay, I don't want to use the chemical sunscreens, but neither do I want to go out in the sun wearing no sunscreen at all. So, because UV exposure is another trigger. So, zinc oxide only sunscreen is really and truly the answer. And back when I was teaching, I would teach these classes to people who had rosacea that were amazingly well attended, and at the end of it, it was always, well, okay, what kind of sunscreen can I use? I can't use the chemical ones. And so I would have to lead them over to the baby aisle, where we would look at the diaper rash cream, and it was literally use the diaper rash cream, which is, not everybody wanted to do that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about why things are triggers, like going a little bit behind that. So thinking about, well, why is UV a trigger?
Well, it creates heat, for one thing.
Creates heat, but it also stimulates...
It's sun damage, and it's creating reactive oxygen species, which,
And it stimulates certain inflammatory receptors.
Yeah.
So you're not only degrading the skin, but you're kind of setting off this cascade of inflammation from all these different angles.
Yeah. And once you've got the inflammation going on, you get vascular changes. Let's talk about that. That's a fun one, because you were talking about that with the with menopause, which I thought was really fascinating, because that's just so.
Oh well,
where relate to that.
Where the actual
so your lipid profile changes. And what was it? Oh, my sebum profile changed. I'm not producing as many lipids.
You reduce the amount of gamma linoleic acid that you're producing.
Yeah.
So your lipid profile will it's changed, and then your protective lipid layer will decrease. So the ecosystem of the skin will decrease. You're going to be more prone to inflammation. So your microbial diversity will change. But then also the within the vascular system, there is an inflammatory process in which it starts to break down the blood vessels. So then you get the degradation there as well. So all the blood vessels are weakened. Yeah, and there's more studies now that show that UV also degrades your vascular system. So it's kind of a double, or a vicious spiral. Oh man, I mean, it's really, there's a lot out to get you. Yeah. And I'm dreading this summer, especially with global warming. We live in Berkeley. We're okay. Well, I also, we won't go there yet. Let's,
but we will eventually.
That kind of covers a lot of the common triggers. We can move on and talk a little bit about some of the treatments now.
Cool.
Okay. So there's more of the typical Western style treatments that you might get from a dermatologist, and then there's some alternative approaches and some internal therapies as well that we want to go over.
Okay, so the first one probably to bring up is the metrodiazole. Metronidazole. So it's Metrogel in brief. And it's pretty much what everybody gets. Even today, you go into a dermatologist and you do your 4-minute diagnosis plus prescription, and you are given a prescription of Metrogel to take home and try.
And that acts on the anaerobic bacteria, right?
Yes, exactly. It acts on the anaerobic bacteria, and they find that people are if they don't have success with that, they're often given clindamycin or some other antibiotic.
Which is a more broad spectrum.
Yeah, so you get a broader spectrum of protection, or actually, just microcidal, a microcidal approach to dealing with rosacea. It's very hit or miss, and it's really based on the old information where people didn't really know what was going on with rosacea. I think we're so much better with the alternative treatments we can offer that have a better understanding of the basic dynamics of rosacea and what's going on.
Well, we also just know the importance of the residential bacteria in the skin and strengthening the entire system. So if you're just treating the inflammatory condition that is rosacea, what about the rest of the skin system? So you can use the antibiotic to kill off all the species and then weaken the system as a whole. So it doesn't end up being a really effective long-term solution. We want to implement strategies that are going to strengthen the system continuously for the long term, not just troubleshoot quickly for these kind of fast results. So what I find, especially in my practice with my clients, is that these antibiotics don't actually work that much, and Metrogel might work initially for a couple weeks or a couple months, and then it stops working entirely, and then you have to go on to a different antibiotic, and then you can go back on the Metrogel, and then you kind of end up in this back and forth kind of dependency spiral that really breaks down the skin, and then they might put you onto steroids at that point to kind of shut down the inflammatory response within the skin, or the immune response within the skin. And once you get into the world of steroids, the side effects really, the negative side effects outweigh the positives. You get thinning of the skin, you change the microbial diversity. Internally, it really interferes with adrenal function.
And another thing, steroids, anybody who prescribes corticosteroids or something like that for somebody with rosacea is pretty much out of the loop, because we do know there is such a thing as, it's a kind of a steroid blowback you can get, and so you're suppressing the inflammation, which works for only so long. And then eventually it stops working, and then the rosacea comes back with a vengeance, and it is extremely hard to deal with it no matter what you do after that, because the steroids aren't working anymore, and that was your court of last resort. What do you do? It's just, no, don't even go near steroids.
And if you use steroids for too long, you'll end up with the withdrawals resulting in like complete skin atrophy.
Oh God,
and complete adrenal fatigue. It really impairs digestive function as well. You'll have to go through sometimes years of recovery
it's
from
absolutely
using too much steroids.
true.
It's very serious. It's really hard to come back from.
And it's tempting, I guess, for people who don't want to go the long, hard road, because the initial response is, I have friends who say, they gave me this corticosteroid, I put it on, and I stopped being red. It does work very effectively for a while, but count on it, it's gonna not work at some point.
Yeah, you want to think about instead, okay, if it's an issue of the immune system, let's not just block it, but let's try to support it in positive ways, and looking at all different sides of it, internally and externally.
So I guess we're getting to treatments. Can I talk about the probiotics?
Yeah, start with probiotics. That's the most exciting stuff.
That really is the newest, the newest treatment.
Do you want to give a little bit of a background about the bacteria that live on the skin first? or just residential, or just kind of the ecosystem of the skin?
Okay, well, the ecosystem of the skin is as you can imagine, we have this microbiome, and it is about 1 trillion microorganisms of about 1,000 different species, not all of whom have been identified yet. So it is the new frontier in terms of skin research, for sure. But there are certainly some bacteria on the skin that are the commensal bacteria, so they're very helpful for the skin, and they keep your skin healthy. One of them is Staphylococcus epidermidis. It releases an AMP, an antimicrobial peptide that really is very helpful in terms of keeping your skin healthy, keeping the environment balanced, and keeping the potential pathogens at bay. So when it comes to, so we've done a little more study with microbes, good ones and the bad ones, with respect to acne. When it comes to rosacea, it's again brand new frontier there. But what we do know about some of the probiotics, if you put them on your skin and you have rosacea, they do 2 different things to mediate the effects of the inflammatory response. And one thing they do is they fool the immune system. So the cells these bacteria in a way distract the cells so they don't see that what really aren't invaders aren't invading, and so the inflammatory response doesn't happen. The other thing they do is they have a sort of calming effect on some of the cells that they get next to the probiotics, and it just has a sort of calming effect on them. It's very fascinating. We're still working on figuring out what's going on there, but it is it is an absolutely fascinating and unique way of dealing with rosacea, and it's also very non-aggressive. I mean, nothing we're doing there disrupts the microbial balance or does anything to harm the skin in any way. So, it's very exciting.
It's pretty much all positive. And it will help with other symptoms potentially down the road, such as
that's the thing.
Dermatitis or acne or anything. By promoting, microbial diversity and harmony, you're just strengthening everything. Creating more stability.
Yeah, that's right. And so you enlist the aid of these microbes to do your work in keeping your skin microbiome balanced.
It's
different ways.
It's the same as, probiotics being immune support for the gut.
Totally.
Those little shots of probiotics when you feel sick.
You
take that. It's supporting immune function. The same thing works topically for the skin.
Yep.
Some other topical kind of more alternative things: zinc oxide sunscreen, anti-inflammatory, also safe and protects you against UV.
Because the first thing is preventive. So the less you can, the less you are exposed to UV rays that will damage your skin, the less likely you are to have some kind of inflammatory response. So, that's kind of
retinoids also. You can use a retinol. It is anti-inflammatory, and it can block some of those signals that result in the secretion of cathelicidin.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, I didn't read that.
You're the one who loves retinoids.
I know. Woo, I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Really? Yeah, you'll have to show me that. I missed that. Really? How fascinating. How great.
I'm not making it up.
I mean, man, is there anything they do not do?
I'm not sure. I know, it's like our winning ingredient time after time. It balances oil production too, which can be beneficial for the entire skin system as well, especially if you have more of the type of rosacea that has little pustules or breakouts. niacinamide, which we love and put in our products as well. It can help strengthen the blood capillaries, supporting the whole vascular network, anti-inflammatory, kind of calming for the skin.
Antioxidants, of course, because reactive oxygen species that go in there and create heat, create skin damage. If you can neutralize them as much as possible, you
What
are.
kind of antioxidants specifically?
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, there's the usual ones, CE. What else? There's also
Phenol group?
The phenol group is hugely important. So ECGC from epigallocatechin gallate from green tea, I think is hugely beneficial. Anybody who has rosacea would benefit from using. Do we have the pre-pro nest? Well, we've got the hypotonic. That also does wonders because it's got the green tea and the epigallocatechin gallate. But it's also got the pre and probiotics in there too, so it's a good way to. And also, there is just something about mechanically, if you're hot, and I get this, 4 or 5 times a day at least, and even right now. So you're hot, and a good way to just cool yourself down, splash cold water on your skin, but you can also use something like the hypotonic or the pre-pro nest and just
to cool it down.
And it just cools you down.
You can keep this in the fridge too, which feels extra refreshing.
Yeah. So there's other ways to cool down. Talk about the vagus nerve, will you? So Christina was just telling me about the vagus nerve today.
This isn't necessarily a proven treatment or theory for rosacea, but the vagus nerve system runs, from the base of your head down your spine, and it has a lot of influence on the digestive system, stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system, a lot of different organs, and she's stimulating it. I showed her some points on the ear. I was like, "Are you plugging your ears? That's so rude." No, she's stimulating your vagus nervous system. It calms you down. So there's also this theory of just calming the body and putting it into like the rest and digest mode to stimulate proper circulation in the body and proper blood flow to reduce heat and rosacea-like symptoms. I'm a big believer that rosacea has so much to do with organ function, particularly the gut. I think it has to do with the microbial picture of the digestive system. Any sluggishness could increase vulnerability to rosacea, and also immune support entirely, and hormonal balance as well. So, just wherever your whatever state your internal body is at, it's going to influence the whole immune picture, which will then influence what's happening with blood flow, how you're stimulated, how you're able to go into rest and relaxation mode, and then what's happening within the skin. All the conversations between the organs and how.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, even to the way it looks, I imagine a gut that's inflamed turns all red. And so there is, there is that lining, that endothelial lining, right? That is very similar to the skin on our faces. And so
that's the whole theory behind H. pylori.
Okay, we'll talk about that. I don't know that I'm buying it, but go ahead.
Well, that has an influence on the gut lining, and it can influence the acid mantle and lead to other kind of disturbances in the microbial picture. And so there's a theory that patients with rosacea have an overgrowth of a certain gram-negative bacteria called H. pylori.
Yeah, they were on the trail of accusing H. pylori of being responsible for gingivitis and gum disease. And I don't know that they really you, and oddly, this is why I'm not completely sold on the theory, because that theory didn't go anywhere. But the interesting thing is that people with rosacea often have gum disease. So there you go. They have weak gums. Like
so then why are you saying
gingivitis.
that it's probably not true?
Because I don't think that they established a link between H. pylori being the problem behind gingivitis. So if it's not the problem behind gingivitis, it probably doesn't affect rosacea either, because I do think these things are all linked.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Wait, we didn't talk about ivermectin. So
Okay.
going back just a step to some of the
Human
prescriptions
phenotypes,
from your dermatologist, oftentimes they might prescribe ivermectin if they do think that your rosacea is a result from an overgrowth of overtaking of the Demodex mites. Do you want to explain how ivermectin works?
Oh, well, it's a fungicide, and the mite is, it fits in that category of something that you figure will just reduce the mite population on the skin, and it will help clear out the skin of people who are exhibiting signs of rosacea secondary to a mite infestation. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. So I think that's what's so interesting about rosacea, though, is that we have all these theories. We have many, many theories, and many treatments, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So there's not one size fits all. Rosacea's
So it's actually much better, instead of trying to come up with the exact reason why you have it, and just think about how, again, going back to how you're just going to support the entire system, how you can support the internal body, blood flow, circulation, immune system, and how you can support a healthy skin system.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, which is the hard part. I mean, everybody would love to have, the one.
Well, that's going to look different for everybody.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's not easy.
A couple things internally that you can implement, similarly to the topicals, would be supplements or foods to support your immune system. So vitamin C. You can eat citrus, red bell peppers. You can take a vitamin C supplement. Probiotics, eating fermented foods, beet kvass, sauerkrauts, things like that.
Yeah.
Take a probiotic. Certain antioxidants are beneficial as well. You can take turmeric, quercetin, resveratrol, green tea, chamomile, basil,
Rum.
They all contain phenols. Omega-3 has a lovely anti-inflammatory response, supports proper vagus nerve activity stimulation. B vitamins are big players in overall skin function, health, nervous system response. Minerals, trace elements. So eating a really healthy diet of whole foods, minimal processed foods, really wide range and variety. It's all super important.
So I guess, if you look at the whole picture, it just becomes, well, you have to do a little bit of experimenting to find out what's going to work for you. But I think the other thing, too, is to know that you can control rosacea. Sure, you're going to have flushing episodes, but if you do all of those things that are better for you than the things you do that may not be so great, but you should do those too. I mean, everything is in balance, so it's not like don't stop drinking tea or coffee and don't stop drinking the occasional glass of red wine. I'm ready for another one. But I know.
Just kidding.
I'm trying to calm down. But the point is, don't freak out. Figure it's going to take a while to get it under control. The best thing, though, you can do, bar none, first of all, is to wear sunscreen every single day, zinc oxide only. That made a huge difference for me, and that's actually how I started in skincare, was with zinc oxide. Back to the diaper rash cream, because people didn't really want to wear diaper rash cream all over their faces, and I didn't either. So they said, well, make something. So
and what is diaper rash cream made out of?
It's zinc oxide.
Some people might not know that.
Yeah, that's true. You may not, but it actually works wonderful for diaper rash. But you wonderfully well. But you don't really. Yeah, you're not going to walk around all day wearing diaper rash cream. You're just not. So the next best thing is. So I created something that is zinc oxide only, but you know it doesn't show. You put it on your skin, and it pretty much disappears on your skin, and also has the advantage of not only being an anti-inflammatory, but it does calm down the redness to a considerable degree. So, you know, there are cosmetic things you can do about rosacea, and just kind of try not to freak out about it, because that only makes it worse.
Well, let's talk about kind of how some of our products and a protocol that you can do for rosacea that I think works pretty well. So we have our Pure and EO-free cleanser, the Balancing Hypotonic, and I'll walk you through the details of this. We'll do the Seething B3, the Barrier Store, and then an oil for your moisturizer. So probably the Barrier Lipid Complex or the treatment oil, and then the sunscreen. So basically this protocol here could be used for someone if they have rosacea.
I use them.
So do I. What we left out was vitamin C.
Oh yeah, and retinol. Did we add
and retinol?
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So basically what we have here with this regimen is not a lot of potential aggravating ingredients. So minimal essential oils, nothing that's going to potentially sensitize the skin, and all of these are going to be in support of the microbial picture of the skin. So it's about protecting the really, really important lipid layers and kind of stabilizing the ecosystem so that all these really positive residential bacteria can exist and thrive and minimize the pathogenics, reducing inflammation with niacinamide and promoting barrier function. And then with the oils, you know, if you have more of like the dry, mature skin type rosacea, you'd want to use the Barrier Lipid Complex. So this is going to provide the lipids and the ceramides and the cholesterols to kind of maintain that strong lipid layer. If you have more of the rosacea with, you know, acne-like symptoms, pustules, breakouts, you might want to use the treatment oil. So this is going to regulate the oil production. Also kind of like clear and decongest the pores a little bit, and then the zinc oxide only sunscreen here. You could throw in also the vitamin C serum or a vitamin C serum for the antioxidants. Very important also the retinol at night if you wanted. We just kind of went through why retinol is important. If you're kind of getting a lot of congestion, you can use intensive repair, something with an AHA, BHA component in it. And if you need to spot treat with actual pimples, you can use the treatment serum. So this is a very detailed protocol. It does not mean you have to use all of these steps. I just wanted to give all of the possible products if you wanted to do a really long protocol. But this is kind of covering all the bases of how to create strong and healthy skin for someone with rosacea. And we'll post this later and give you all the details so you don't have to worry about that.
Well, what I like is how you were talking about building up the skin, and you know, I mean your body, and you know, you do all these things to sort of just keep everything in balance in terms of your body. You know what it needs. You give it the things it needs. This is sort of the outside equivalent of that, of what you're doing inside.
Yeah.
So it dovetails perfectly into what you are doing to build up your gut microbiome, for instance, if you've got gut issues. So, you know, it all makes sense. And some stuff you do internally, other stuff you do externally, some stuff you want to do both.
And they're all going to work synergistically, hopefully, if you're you can kind of follow the same strategy for both. Do we want to do some questions?
Is there a hereditary element to?
Yes.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, about 1/3 of people who have rosacea have a family history of rosacea.
But that doesn't mean you can't change it. So even if you come from a family where everyone, all your aunts and uncles and grandparents have rosacea, you don't have to have rosacea.
Well, okay. I mean, one thing you could do is start slathering sunscreen. If you come from a family where everybody has rosacea, I would start using sunscreen on the little kids very early on. And even some of the little kids, you will see they're already en route. I mean, you can see you see kids sometimes with the bright red cheeks. This is not cute. This is this is rosacea. Yeah, you do wanna, for certain people, you're gonna wanna take preventive steps. Absolutely.
So I would say, I talk about this a lot. So if you are predisposed to this with your, genetically, you want to think about all the factors for the skin of having healthy skin, but then you also want to think about, okay, what's going on physically within the bodies of your parents? What are some of the health conditions that they had? And then you kind of want to troubleshoot there. So if, for instance, you come from a line where every woman in your family has hypothyroidism, you can go there and work on thyroid function. So that's just an example, but that's the way that you can kind of change the patterns within your family.
Well, actually, I call it, for people of Irish descent like me, and they call rosacea the Celtic curse, but I call it displaced skin. So here I am in California, and I'm exposed to all this UV where really I should be in Ireland where the sun comes out maybe once out of every 365 days. I am supposed to be in a cold, dank climate, and actually my skin adores cold, dank climates, and I'm not in one. And for that reason, I will probably move at some point. I keep talking about it. But really and truly, nature designed, certain groups of people to live within this certain, fair skin, for instance. Our fair skin is designed to capture every last vitamin D particle when the sun comes out, which is rarely, as opposed to somebody who lives closer to the equator and has a lot more melanin because their thing is all about protecting from too much sun exposure. So, your skin is designed to be in a certain geographical location, but with the modern world, we move around a lot, so we're not where nature planned us to be in terms of our skin and how it functions.
Is retinol safe for acne-prone skin? Every time I use retinol, I get cystic acne, but I also have rosacea.
That's complicated. We need to know what retinols you're using. If it's prescription retinol, or if it's retinoic acid, or if it's retinaldehyde, if it's retinol. So that will, tell us basically how something is formulated. The thing is, with a lot of products, it's not the retinoid that causes the reaction, that causes sensitization or causes the acne. So if that's kind of going into an acne lecture. It's kind of impossible to say that a retinoid would cause cystic acne. So it's more than likely that you're having some sort of inflammatory response or reaction to a stabilizing ingredient, or the response of all the preservatives in the products, rather than it being the actual retinoid itself. So it's hard to answer that question really.
Yeah.
Please DM us with more details.
You can just send us a message, you can email us for more details, and we can kind of go into that because we need more information to be able to answer that appropriately.
Can broken capillaries be repaired?
Okay, well, here's the thing about broken capillaries. It's not, it's misapprehension. They aren't really broken so much as they are when you have rosacea. So you you have a weakened vascular system because you have these periodic flushing episodes, and your capillaries and your veins dilate, right? And with rosacea, it takes a long time for the dilation to recede, to subside. Often, some of the capillaries don't actually subside at all, and they look like broken capillaries, but they really are dilated capillaries.
You
and
can
you can actually work to shrink them. Yeah.
naturally, and there are laser treatments that are effective, but in my experience, it kind of comes back unless you do the actual real work.
Yeah, and it also helps to take a lot of vitamin C with bioflavonoids to help strengthen the capillary walls.
I've seen crazy results in clients who put in the work and do the internal support and the external support with like completely chronic red faces all over to no redness whatsoever. So there's a lot that can be done. Don't ever feel discouraged.
Do you prefer the hypotonic or the probiotic mist after cleansing for rosacea?
Well, me, I like the hypotonic.
Yeah.
Just because,
Well,
I mean, some people like Greek mist.
I would say I think that the hypotonic.
Well, here's the deal. Hypotonic has got selenium in it, and so where you may have a yeast infection that is masquerading as, something going on, some kind of fungus, something going on in your skin that is masquerading as rosacea symptoms but isn't really, the hypotonic will be very helpful for that. And so since there's so many mitigating factors here, I would say, try the hypotonic, see if it works.
How can I distinguish if I am also breaking out while having a rosacea flare-up, and do I need to treat breakouts differently?
No, actually, that is something I would say sharp no, because if you treat rosacea like acne, you can make it so much worse, because typical acne treatments are more about sterilizing and drying out and stripping the skin, pulling the oils. It can really aggravate rosacea, make you much more vulnerable, susceptible to all these different other triggers as well. So what you want to focus on is reduction of inflammation, calming the heat, just general calming and nourishing with antioxidants, anti-inflammatories, things that are going to strengthen the system rather than deplete it and pull it away. The last thing you want to use is something like a benzoyl peroxide or malic acid or something, as you would for acne typically on a rosacea breakout. I think it's hard to, if it's in your cheeks, if you're having like little tiny superficial pimples on your cheeks, it's pretty safe to say it's your rosacea, it's not acne. If you're having a rosacea flare-up and then you have, a pimple on your forehead or jawline acne or something, those are probably two different things happening. It could be just like a big inflammatory burst internally that's triggering that. But definitely, if you believe it's the rosacea, don't treat it like acne. Don't try to squeeze it either. It'll cause more inflammation.
No. And back in the bad old days, they even called it acne rosacea before we knew that it was an entirely different
icing,
species.
cooling.
Anything that cools off the skin. Deal with the inflammation.
Apple cider vinegar.
My dermatologist recommended Financia today.
Financia.
Thoughts on adding that for inflammation and hormonal acne?
Financia is crazy prescribed all the time for hormonal acne, for rosacea, for dermatitis. I believe it's an anti-inflammatory with antibiotic. Again, it's a synthetic product for your skin that is more quick fix derived rather than the long-term picture. It's not in support of a robust microbial diversity, it might have some short-term positive impacts, but eventually you'll have to go off of it, just with a lot of like the acne medications.
I know, our fans are gathering.
You can send us an email if you want a more complete. I can look up the ingredients and see what's in Financia. I'm not exactly remembering right now, but I do know that it's often overprescribed. So.
This might be a little off topic, but can you speak to hormonal imbalance in terms of being on birth control for over a decade and possible effects of excess estrogen and or progesterone? Not sure if that has to do with rosacea or not.
Yeah, it can. I mean, it can throw off the overall balance of the body. Being on birth control is sometimes something that you have to do. You can't get pregnant. That's totally understandable. There's not a lot of options. However, birth control is really tricky because it's a chemical cocktail of hormones made for one type of woman, not necessarily you. So it could be, you know, a constant input of hormones that doesn't really vibe with your body and could have some, you know, negative impacts. There's a lot of things within the body that influence the ability to metabolize estrogen, which can lead to excess estrogen, which has a big impact on the skin. All the androgen receptors usually start going into hyperdrive when you have excess estrogen, leading to increased oil production and typically acne along the jawline and the chin. There is a lot of information out there for women these days. There's some really great books that can help you understand the you know, the 4 phases of a cycle and the hormonal balance and kind of ways to troubleshoot symptoms. There's one called Taking Charge of Fertility. That's just pretty basic in helping you understand. You can also, you know, see acupuncturists and naturopaths, which will draw blood labs and help you understand exactly where your hormonal levels are. You know, we have 1 minute left, so basically what I can say is that it is possible that birth control is negatively impacting your skin. It's not the case for everybody, but if you are symptomatic, you might want to investigate, you know, slowly going off of it or seeking professional help. Sorry, we're totally out of time. I'm getting the wave. You can always feel free to email if you have other questions. We'd love to answer all of your questions if we had the time. Hopefully the little touching on rosacea that we did this hour was helpful. Bye.